He didn't touch those files. The words cut clean through the glass-walled conference room, sharper than the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. For a split second, no one moved. Then the senior manager leaned back in his chair, slow, deliberate, like he had been waiting for someone to challenge him. "Excuse me." His voice was calm, but the edge underneath it made the air feel thinner. Olivia Carter did not sit down. Her fingers tightened around the worn notebook at her side, the leather edges soft from years of use. Her thumb pressed against a crease she knew by heart. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan flickered in a grid of white and amber lights, traffic crawling like veins of fire 48 floors below. Inside, the room smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer toner. "I said," Olivia repeated, steadier now. He didn't have access to those files. A quiet shuffle moved around the table. Someone cleared their throat. Another person glanced down at their phone, then quickly locked the screen. At the far end of the room, the janitor stood beside a gray supply cart, one hand resting lightly on the handle of a mop. He had not said a word since the accusation. Not when the folder had been slammed onto the table. Not when his name had been written in bold black marker across the top page like a conclusion instead of a question. He just stood there, still, watching. Olivia noticed the way he held himself, not defensive, not apologetic, just attentive. Like he was taking notes no one else could see. "Olivia," the manager said, leaning forward now, fingers steepled. "This is a compliance issue. We need a statement. You reviewed the access logs, correct?" Her heart kicked once, hard, like a door slamming shut somewhere inside her chest. On the table in front of her, a printed email draft blinked open on her laptop. Promotion review. Pending approval. She could almost feel it, 6 figures, a corner office, a way out of the cramped walk-up she had been sharing with a roommate who never paid rent on time. All she had to do was nod. Just agree. Sign off. Close the file. Her grip tightened around the notebook again, the spine pressing into her palm. A memory flickered, too fast, too sharp. Fluorescent lights. A metal chair. Her father sitting across from a panel of strangers, his hands folded too neatly in his lap, grease still under his fingernails. "We just need you to confirm what happened," someone had said. And Olivia, sitting in the back, had stayed quiet. The present snapped back in. The manager's eyes were on her, expectant now. "We do not have all night." Somewhere behind her, a chair leg scraped against the floor. The janitor shifted slightly, the faint squeak of rubber soles against polished tile barely audible. He looked at her, not pleading, not demanding, just waiting. Olivia swallowed, her throat dry. The city lights outside pulsed faintly against the glass, reflections flickering across the room like something alive. "Then let's get it right," she said quietly. "If you are watching this right now, take a second to hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you do not miss what happens next, and tell me in the comments. What time is it where you are, and where are you watching from? Because what Olivia says next is about to change everything." The manager's lips pressed into a thin line, like he had just tasted something sour but was too polite to spit it out. "Right?" he said, tapping the folder once with his index finger. "Then explain why restricted financial projections were accessed at 9:13 p.m. from a terminal assigned to this floor." He slid a printed log across the table. The paper made a soft, dry sound against the glass surface. Olivia did not reach for it immediately. She already knew what it would say. She had pulled the logs herself an hour ago, sitting alone at her desk with a half-finished cup of cold coffee and the cleaning crew moving quietly in the background. Timestamp. Terminal ID. User, unassigned. That was the part no one wanted to talk about. "That terminal is in the East Corridor," Olivia said, finally stepping forward. Her heels clicked once, then again, measured, controlled. Outside the secure zone. The manager raised an eyebrow. "And yet the data was still compromised." "Access requires badge authentication," she replied. "A janitor cart does not. Come with clearance credentials." A faint ripple of discomfort moved around the table. Someone shifted in their seat. Someone else flipped a page they were not reading. The manager leaned back again, slower this time. "You are making assumptions." "No," Olivia said, and this time she picked up the paper, glancing down just long enough to confirm what she already knew. "I am reading the system correctly." Her pulse was no longer spiking. It had settled into something steadier, heavier, like a weight she had decided to carry instead of drop. She placed the log back on the table, aligning it carefully with the edge, the way her father used to line up his tools on the kitchen counter, each wrench parallel, each screwdriver facing the same direction. Sunday mornings smelled like machine oil and cheap pancake syrup back then. He would sit at the small table by the window, sketching wiring diagrams on scrap paper, explaining circuits like they were stories. Electricity always leaves a trail, he used to say, tapping the page with a pencil worn down to a stub. You just have to follow it. Olivia swallowed, her fingers brushing the notebook again. The same notebook. The same handwriting on the inside cover, slightly faded now. If something is wrong, do not stay quiet. Olivia, the manager said, his tone tightening just enough to signal the shift. We are not here to debate philosophy. We are here to resolve liability. There it was. Not truth. Liability. Across the room, the janitor adjusted his grip on the mop handle, the plastic creaking softly under pressure. He still had not stepped forward, had not defended himself. Just watching. Waiting. It struck Olivia then, not for the first time, how easy it was for a room like this to decide who mattered and who did not. Title. Salary. Which side of the table you sat on. 5 years ago, it had been a different room, smaller, harsher lighting, metal chairs that scraped too loud when you moved. Her father had worn his only button-down shirt, the collar slightly frayed. He kept smoothing it down with his hands, like that alone might make them take him seriously. We have reason to believe protocol was not followed, someone had said, not looking at him when they spoke. Olivia had known it was wrong. She had seen the maintenance logs, the skipped inspections that had nothing to do with him. She had felt the words rising in her throat, pressing, urgent. And then she had looked at the faces across the table, at the way they had already decided, and something inside her had folded in on itself. She had stayed quiet. The memory did not feel distant. It felt present, like it had been waiting just under the surface for this exact moment to come back up. We need a statement, the manager said again, sharper now. Was the janitor responsible for the breach? Yes or no? The room held its breath. Olivia looked at the paper, then at the man standing by the cart, then back at the manager. The easy answer sat right there, within reach. One word. Clean. Final. Safe. Her promotion. Her future. A life that did not include secondhand furniture and overdue notices taped to the door. She could already see it, the email sent, the congratulations, the quiet nods of approval in rooms like this one. All it would cost was a signature. The janitor's eyes met hers again. Calm. Unreadable. Not asking for anything. That made it worse somehow. Olivia exhaled slowly, the sound barely audible over the low hum of the air conditioning. No, she said. Not louder. Not softer. Just firm. The word landed in the center of the table like something solid. The manager did not respond right away. He studied her, head tilted slightly, as if recalibrating. Careful, he said after a beat. You are attaching your name to that answer. Olivia nodded once. I know. And this time, when she looked down at the notebook in her hand, she did not feel the hesitation that had lived there for years. She felt the weight of it, and she did not let go. The manager did not argue right away, which was worse than if he had. He just leaned back, eyes narrowing slightly, like he was rearranging the room in his head and deciding where Olivia fit now. Then walk us through it, he said finally, tapping the table once. If it was not him, explain how the breach happened. Olivia did not answer immediately. Instead, she set her notebook down. On the glass surface, slower than necessary, the soft thud cutting through the silence more than any raised voice could. The cover had darkened over the years, edges worn smooth where her fingers had traced the same corners again and again. A faint crease ran diagonally across it. From the night it had slipped out of her backpack and hit concrete outside the subway on Lexington. She opened it carefully, not to the first page, but somewhere in the middle, where the paper had thinned from being handled too often. Her handwriting layered over another, older one. Thicker strokes. Uneven spacing. Her father's. This building runs on segmented access, she said, her voice steady, but quieter now, forcing the room to lean in instead of pushing back. Maintenance corridors, server rooms, executive offices. Each one is isolated unless you have the right badge credentials. She turned the notebook slightly, angling it toward the table. Lines and arrows crossed the page, rough but precise. a sketched layout of a system most people in the room had never bothered to understand beyond the interface on their screens. Electricity always leaves a trail, she added, almost under her breath, like the words were not meant for them. For a second, she saw it again, not the glass walls around her, but the narrow kitchen in Queens, the hum of an old refrigerator, her father hunched over the table with a pencil tucked behind his ear. He would draw the same diagram 3 times if she did not get it the first time, patient in a way that felt endless back then. "You do not guess," he would say, sliding the paper toward her. "You follow what is there." A chair shifted across the table. The manager's fingers tapped once, then stilled. "We are not reviewing a classroom exercise," he said. Olivia nodded slightly. "No, we are not." She reached into her bag without breaking eye contact and pulled out a second page, folded, edges frayed. It had been torn from the notebook years ago, carried separately, tucked into whatever pocket or folder she had that day. The paper had a faint oil stain in one corner, the kind that never really came out. She placed it beside the printed log. "This is the access panel layout for the East Corridor," she said. "Manual override is behind a locked casing. Requires a maintenance key and a badge scanned to log entry." The manager glanced at it, then back at her. "And?" Olivia turned the page slightly, tapping a small square drawn near the bottom. "This panel feeds the terminal in your report. If someone accessed restricted data from that machine, they had to go through here first." She let the implication sit there, unforced. Around the table, the subtle shifts grew less subtle. Someone leaned forward. Someone else frowned, actually reading the paper now instead of waiting for a summary. "So you are saying the system is wrong," the manager said. "No," Olivia replied. "I am saying the system is incomplete." She slid the log a few inches to the side, aligning it with the diagram. "There is no maintenance key logged under his name. No badge skin tied to his shift. If he had opened that panel, it would be here." Her finger hovered over the blank space, not touching it, just close enough to draw every eye to it. "It is not." The janitor shifted again, but this time it was not just a weight adjustment. He stepped half an inch closer to the table, enough that the overhead light caught his face differently. For the first time, Olivia noticed something she had missed before. Not just the calm, the attention. It was the way he was looking at the notebook. Not like it was evidence. Like it was familiar. Like he understood exactly what he was seeing. The thought flickered and passed before she could hold on to it. The manager exhaled slowly, his patience thinning at the edges. "You are building a theory," he said. "We need accountability." Olivia closed the notebook, her palm resting flat on the cover for a second longer than necessary. The worn leather pressed back against her skin, grounding, steady. 5 years ago, she had sat in a different chair, hands folded, saying nothing while someone else rewrote the truth in real time. She had watched it happen, line by line, until it became official, permanent. This time, the paper in front of her was not blank. The trail was there. She just had to keep following it. "Then let us hold the right person accountable," she said, lifting her hand from the notebook and meeting his gaze without flinching. The manager did not respond right away, and that silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional, like a pressure test instead of hesitation. Then he stood, smoothing the front of his jacket with a quick, practiced motion. "We are done here," he said, not looking at Olivia anymore. "I will take this to the board." The word landed heavier than the rest. Board. It shifted the room in a way nothing else had. Chairs moved back. Laptops closed. People avoided eye contact now, not out of discomfort, but calculation. Olivia stayed where she was, her hand still resting on the notebook, watching the manager gather the papers she had just aligned so carefully, stacking them without regard for order. The janitor did not move until the room began to empty. One by one, the others filed out, murmuring low, clipped phrases that dissolved into the hallway. The glass door swung shut behind the last of them with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. For the first time that night, the space felt too big, too quiet. Olivia exhaled slowly, not realizing she had been holding her breath. She reached for her notebook, sliding it back toward herself, fingertips brushing over the worn cover as if checking it was still there. Across the room, the janitor set the mop back into the cart with a careful, almost deliberate motion, like he was putting something away that mattered more than it appeared. He wiped his hands on a folded cloth, then glanced toward the table. Not at the empty chairs, At the notebook. That diagram, he said, his voice low, steady, not quite casual. You drew it yourself? Olivia looked up, caught slightly off guard by the question. The room had shifted again, but in a different way now, less like a stage, more like a place people actually occupied. Part of it, she said. The rest, I learned a long time ago. He nodded once, stepping a little closer, not enough to crowd her space, just enough that the distance felt intentional instead of accidental. It is accurate, he said. There was no praise in the words, just a simple observation, but it landed differently than anything else that had been said all night. Olivia studied him for a second, trying to place what felt off. It was not his tone. It was not his posture. It was the way he spoke about the system, like he understood it beyond surface level, like he had seen it from the inside out. You have worked here long? She asked. He gave a small shrug, one shoulder lifting slightly higher than the other. Long enough to notice patterns. The answer was vague, almost dismissive, but not careless. He reached for the cart, adjusting the position of a spray bottle that had not been out of place to begin with. Olivia watched the movement, the precision of it. Patterns like what? She asked. He paused, just for a fraction of a second, then looked at her again. People, he said. What they say when something goes wrong. What they do not say. The words settled between them, not heavy, but not light either. Olivia let out a quiet breath, glancing down at the notebook again. Her thumb traced the edge of the page she had opened earlier, the faint indentation where her father's pencil had pressed too hard years ago. You think I said enough? She asked, before she could stop herself. The question surprised her as much as it might have surprised him. He did not answer right away. Instead, he stepped closer to the table, close enough now that the overhead light caught the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that came from paying attention more than smiling. He looked at the notebook again, then back at her. You said what you could prove, he replied. That is different from saying everything. Olivia felt that settle somewhere deeper than she expected. Not criticism, not approval, just a gap she had not closed yet. She closed the notebook gently, the soft thud echoing faintly in the empty room. That might be enough, she said. He tilted his head slightly, considering that. For tonight, he said. Maybe. He reached for the cart again, this time pulling it a few inches forward, the wheels rolling quietly over the polished floor. Then he stopped, one hand still on the handle. You should check the secondary access logs, he added, almost as an afterthought. Sometimes the system records what people do not expect it to. Olivia looked up sharply. There are no secondary logs for that corridor, she said automatically. He met her gaze, steady, unreadable. There are, he said. They are just not where most people look. He did not explain further. Just nudged the cart forward and started toward the door, the soft squeak of the wheels fading as he moved away. Olivia stood there for a moment, the quiet pressing in again, but different now. Not empty. Charged. She opened the notebook again, flipping past the diagram to a blank page, her pen already moving before she had fully formed the thought. Secondary logs. Not where most people look. The words circled once, then twice, as if repetition might pull meaning out of them. She glanced toward the door he had just walked through, then back at the page. Whatever this was, it was not over. Not even close. Olivia did not go home. The building had shifted into its after-hours rhythm, the kind that only showed itself when the day crowd disappeared. The overhead lights dimmed slightly in the corridors, and the usual noise of conversation was replaced by the distant hum of ventilation and the occasional echo of footsteps that never seemed to belong to anyone specific. She sat at her desk with her laptop open, the glow of the screen casting a pale reflection across the glass partition in front of her. Secondary logs. Not where most people look. She had already checked the standard audit trail twice. Nothing new. Nothing useful. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, then moved again, pulling up a deeper layer of system diagnostics most analysts never touched unless something was already on fire. The interface was clunkier here, less polished, like it had been built for people who cared more about function than presentation. She adjusted her chair, leaning closer, scanning line after line until her eyes started to blur. Somewhere down the hall, a cartwheel squeaked. Not loud, just enough to cut through the silence. Olivia paused, listening. The sound moved, slow and steady, then stopped. A few seconds later, it started again, closer this time. She did not turn around right away. Instead, she typed one more command, watched the system hesitate, then return a set of entries she had not seen before. Hidden behind maintenance access, time-stamped within seconds of the breach. Her breath caught, but she did not react outwardly. Not yet. You found something, his voice said from behind her. It was not a question. Olivia leaned back slightly, letting the tension ease out of her shoulders just enough to move. Maybe, she said, turning halfway in her chair. He stood a few feet away, one hand resting on the handle of the cardigan, like it had become a natural extension of him. The overhead light caught the side of his face, casting a shadow that softened the lines she had started to notice earlier. You knew where to look, she added. He gave a small shrug. I suggested it. That is not the same thing. He did not argue with that. Instead, he stepped a little closer, not intruding, just enough to see the screen over her shoulder. Olivia shifted slightly, making space without thinking about it. The cursor blinked steadily next to a string of system entries, each one marked with a badge ID that did not match any cleaning crew profile. Not even close. Maintenance override, she said quietly. Logged under a restricted credential. He leaned in just enough to read the numbers, his expression unchanged, but his focus sharpened in a way she recognized now. Not assigned to him, he said. No, Olivia replied. She tapped the screen lightly with her finger. Assigned to someone higher up. The words hung there, heavier than anything that had been said in the conference room. This was not a misunderstanding. This was intention. She reached for her notebook again, flipping to a clean page, her pen moving in quick, precise strokes as she copied the ID and timestamp. The motion felt familiar, grounding in a way nothing else had tonight. You always write things down? He asked. Olivia did not look up. Only the parts that matter. There was a faint pause, the kind that carried more weight than silence alone. Who taught you that? He asked. Her pen slowed for just a second, then continued. Someone who paid attention, she said. Not untrue, just not complete. She closed the notebook halfway, her hand resting on it as if she needed to keep it in place. He used to say systems do not fail quietly, she added after a moment. People make them fail quietly. The janitor nodded slightly, like that made sense to him in a way it might not have to anyone else. And you believe that? He asked. Olivia leaned back again, finally meeting his gaze fully. I have seen it, she said. The answer landed between them without explanation, but it did not need one. He studied her for a moment, not prying, not pushing, just noticing. That is a hard thing to learn early, he said. Olivia let out a small breath that might have been a laugh if it had carried any humor. You get used to it, she said. He shook his head slightly. No, he said. You learn to live with it. That is different. The distinction settled somewhere deeper than she expected. Olivia looked back at the screen, at the numbers she had just written down, the proof sitting quietly in a system most people never questioned. If this is right, she said, more to herself than to him, then the whole narrative from earlier falls apart. Narratives are convenient, he replied. Truth usually is not. She glanced at him again, studying his face more carefully this time. There was something in the way he spoke, the precision of it, the lack of hesitation. It did not match the role he was supposed to be playing. You talk like you have been in that room before, she said. He held her gaze for a second longer than necessary, then looked away, adjusting the position of the cardigan, though it had not moved. Everyone has been in a room like that, he said, just on different sides of the table. Olivia considered that, then nodded slowly. Fair. She turned back to the laptop, pulling up another set of logs, cross-referencing the ID with internal directories. The system took a second to respond, then populated a name. Not fully visible yet. Just the beginning. Enough to know she was close. I am going to need more than this, she said. If I take it forward, it has to hold. It will, he said quietly. She glanced at him, catching the certainty in his tone. Not confidence. Certainty. You seem sure, she said. He met her eyes again, and for a brief moment, something shifted there, something she could not quite place. I am, he replied. Olivia held that for a second, then looked back at the screen, her fingers already moving again. The distance between them had changed, not smaller, not exactly, but different, less defined, like something had been acknowledged without being named. Outside the windows, the city had thinned into scattered lights and long stretches of dark. Inside, the hum of the building continued, steady, indifferent. Olivia wrote one more line in her notebook, underlining it once. Follow the trail. This time, she did not hesitate. The system populated the rest of the name slowly, like it understood the weight of what it was about to reveal. Olivia watched each letter appear, her hands still hovering over the keyboard, her breathing shallow but controlled. She did not say it out loud. Not yet. The janitor did not lean in this time. He stayed where he was, just close enough to see, just far enough to let her have the moment. That is a board-level credential, she said quietly, more to confirm the reality than to explain it. The cursor blinked at the end of the name, steady, indifferent. Olivia reached for her notebook again, writing it down with the same careful precision as everything else, but her pen pressed harder now, leaving a deeper imprint on the page. When she finished, she did not close it right away. Her fingers rested there, as if the act of writing had anchored something that might otherwise drift. "If I take this in," she said, her voice low, "it does not just correct a report. It puts someone at that table in the line of fire." The words hung there, heavier than the data on the screen. The janitor stepped forward then, not toward the laptop, but toward the edge of her desk, his hand resting lightly against the surface. "And if you do not?" he asked. Olivia let out a slow breath, her gaze still fixed on the name she had just uncovered. "Then nothing changes," she said. "It gets rewritten. Again." She finally looked at him, really looked this time. Not just at the outline of his presence, but at the details she had been collecting without realizing it. The way he never rushed a movement. The way he listened without interrupting. The way he spoke about systems like he had built them, not just cleaned around them. "You knew this would be here," she said. It was not accusation. It was recognition. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he reached into the front pocket of his work shirt and pulled out something small, rectangular, and worn at the edges. A badge. Not the generic cleaning crew tag clipped to his belt. This one was different. He turned it once in his fingers before setting it down on the desk beside her notebook. The plastic caught the light, reflecting it back in a brief, sharp line. Olivia's eyes dropped to it. The logo was the same. The name beneath it was not. Daniel Hayes, Chief Executive Officer. She did not react right away. Not with a gasp, not with a step back. The room did not shift. It held still, like it was waiting to see what she would do with the information. Olivia looked at the badge, then at him, then back at the badge again, as if verifying that it existed outside of her own perception. "You are," she started, then stopped, the sentence unfinished, unnecessary. He did not fill it in for her. He just nodded once, the smallest acknowledgement, like this was not the most important part of what was happening. Olivia leaned back slightly in her chair, her hand still resting on the notebook, grounding herself in something familiar. Her mind moved quickly, not in panic, but in recalibration. Every moment from earlier shifted position. The conference room. The silence. The way no one had questioned him being there. The way he had watched instead of reacted. "This was not random," she said. He shook his head. "No." She let that settle, then glanced back at the screen, at the name tied to the access logs. "You already knew who did it." "I had a suspicion," he said. "You confirmed it." Olivia let out a breath that almost sounded like a laugh, but it did not carry any amusement. So this was a test. The word felt too simple for what it actually was. He considered it for a second, then nodded slightly. "Part of one." She looked at him again, sharper now. "And if I had signed off earlier?" The question landed clean, direct, no room to soften it. He did not look away. "Then I would have learned something different," he said. There was no judgment in his tone. That made it land harder. Olivia's fingers tightened slightly on the edge of the notebook, the leather pressing back against her skin. For a brief second, she saw the other room again. The metal chairs. The silence she had chosen. Then it was gone. "You set this up," she said, quieter now. "The meeting. The accusation." "I allowed it to play out," he replied. "There is a difference." Olivia held his gaze, searching for something that might make that distinction easier to accept. She did not find it. Instead, she found something else. Not detachment. Not control. Intention. "You wanted to see who would speak," she said. "I needed to know who already had." The answer shifted something in the space between them. Not distance. Not closeness. Something more precise. Olivia looked down at the badge again, then at her notebook, the two objects side by side. Proof of authority. Proof of truth. She closed the notebook slowly, the soft sound final in a way nothing else had been. "And now you do," she said. Daniel did not respond right away. He picked up the badge, turning it once more in his hand before slipping it back into his pocket, the motion as quiet as everything else he did. "Now I know enough to act," he said. Olivia nodded once, her eyes drifting back to the screen, to the name that had started all of this. The room felt different again, not because of who he was, but because of what that meant for what came next. The choice in front of her had not changed. It had just become clearer. Olivia did not move for a long second after he slipped the badge back into his pocket. The room felt smaller now, not because anything had changed physically, but because the space between what she knew and what she had assumed had collapsed into something sharper, more defined. She rested both hands flat on the desk, grounding herself against the cool surface, then pushed her chair back just enough to stand. "You could have stopped it," she said, not looking at him yet. Her voice was even, but there was a strain underneath it, like tension pulled too tight across a wire. "Back there." Before it went that far, Daniel did not answer immediately. He shifted his weight slightly, the faint creak of his shoe against the floor breaking the quiet. "Yes," he said finally. Olivia turned then, facing him fully. "And you did not." It was not a question. He met her gaze without hesitation. No, the simplicity of it made something tighten in her chest. Not anger exactly. Not yet. Something closer to recognition. "You let them build a case against someone you knew was not responsible," she said. "You let them push it until someone had to decide whether to go along with it or not." Daniel's expression did not change, but his focus sharpened, like he had been expecting this moment. "I let the system reveal itself," he said. Olivia let out a short breath, shaking her head once, not in disbelief, but in disagreement. That is a convenient way to describe it. She took a step away from the desk, pacing once along the edge of the glass wall, then back again, the movement controlled but restless. "You talk about patterns," she continued, her voice quieter now, more precise. "About what people do when something goes wrong. But you created the conditions for it to go wrong." Daniel watched her, not interrupting. When he spoke, it was measured. "Those conditions already existed," he said. "I did not invent them." Olivia stopped, turning back toward him. "You amplified them." The word landed between them, not loud, but deliberate. Daniel considered that, his gaze dropping briefly to the desk, then back to her. "If a structure collapses under pressure," he said, "the problem is not the pressure." Olivia's jaw tightened slightly. "Tell that to the person standing underneath it." The response came faster than she intended, but she did not take it back. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the building filled the space again, steady, indifferent. Daniel stepped closer then, not enough to close the distance entirely, but enough that the conversation shifted from observation to engagement. "You think I should have intervened," he said. Olivia held his gaze. "I think you already knew what was going to happen." He nodded once. "I had a strong indication. And you still let it play out." There was no accusation in her tone now, just fact. Daniel exhaled slowly, his shoulders settling in a way that suggested this was not a new argument for him. "If I step in too early," he said, "I protect the outcome, not the truth." Olivia's fingers curled slightly at her sides. "And if you wait too long," she replied, "you let someone take the fall for something they did not do." The words hung there, heavier than before. Daniel did not respond right away. His eyes flicked briefly to the notebook on the desk, then back to her. "You did not let that happen," he said. Olivia shook her head once. "That is not the point." She stepped closer again, stopping just short of the desk, her hand hovering over the notebook before resting on it. "You gave me a choice," she continued. "Not just about the report. About whether I was willing to risk everything I have built here based on information you already had." Daniel's expression shifted slightly, not defensive, but more focused, like he was narrowing in on the exact center of what she was saying. "I needed to know if you would," he said. Olivia looked at him for a long second, the weight of that settling in. "Why?" she asked. It was the first time the question had come out without edge, without assumption. Just direct. Daniel did not answer immediately. He glanced toward the window, the city lights reflecting faintly across the glass, then back at her. "Because the person who sees the flaw in the system is not always the one who is willing to act on it," he said. Olivia let that sit, her thumb tracing the edge of the notebook unconsciously. "So you were not just testing the system," she said. "You were testing me." Daniel met her gaze. "Yes." The honesty of it did not soften the impact. If anything, It made it sharper. Olivia looked down at the notebook, then back at the screen, where the name still sat, waiting. "You are asking me to take this forward," she said, knowing exactly what it will cost. "I am not asking," he replied. "I am observing what you choose to do." She let out a breath, slower this time, the tension shifting but not disappearing. "That is a nice way of saying the responsibility is mine." Daniel did not disagree. It always was. The answer settled into the space between them, not confrontational, but unyielding. Olivia closed the notebook again, her hand resting on top of it, feeling the weight of it in a way that was no longer just memory. "You built a system that rewards silence," she said quietly. Daniel's gaze held steady. "I am trying to change that." Olivia looked at him, really looked this time, weighing not just his words, but everything behind them. "Then you might want to start by deciding how much damage you are willing to let happen before you call it a lesson," she said. The line was not raised. It did not need to be. Daniel absorbed it without reaction, but something in his posture shifted, almost imperceptibly. Olivia turned back to the desk, opening the notebook again, her pen already in her hand. The conflict had not resolved anything. It had clarified it. And clarity, she realized, came with its own kind of cost. Olivia did not speak again. She did not argue, did not pace, did not try to win the moment. Instead, she turned back to the laptop and pulled the keyboard closer, the quiet scrape against the desk sounding louder than it should have. The name on the screen sat there, unchanged, waiting. She stared at it for a second longer, then moved. Her fingers began to type, not fast, not hesitant, just deliberate, each keystroke landing with intention. Daniel did not interrupt. He stayed where he was, watching, not as a supervisor, not as a judge, but as someone who understood exactly what each action cost. Olivia opened a new internal report window, the kind that did not get circulated through the usual approval chain unless someone pushed it there. Her cursor hovered over the access field for a moment. Then she typed in her own credentials, granting the file full visibility. No filters, no internal routing, direct escalation. It was a small box on the screen, easy to overlook. Most people never checked it. She did. Behind her, the faint hum of the building continued, steady and indifferent, like it had been all night. She reached for her notebook again, flipping to the page where she had written the ID. The ink had pressed through slightly, visible on the back of the paper. She traced it once with her finger, then tore the page out carefully along the crease, the sound soft but final. For a second, she held it in her hand, feeling the thinness of the paper, the years it carried with it. Then she set it beside the keyboard and began transferring the information line by line, not copying blindly, but verifying each detail as she went. Timestamp, credential, access point, each one anchored in the system logs, each one tied to something real. No assumptions, no gaps, just the trail. Daniel shifted slightly, his hand resting on the edge of the desk now, closer than before, but still not interfering. "Once you submit that," he said quietly, "it cannot be pulled back." Olivia did not look at him. "I know." Her voice was steady, but there was a weight behind it that had not been there earlier. Not hesitation. Acceptance. She finished typing the last entry and paused, her finger hovering over the trackpad. The send button sat in the corner of the screen, unremarkable, almost too small for what it represented. She glanced down at the notebook again, at the empty space where the page had been, then at the remaining pages, filled with diagrams, notes, fragments of something that had shaped how she saw the world. Her father's handwriting appeared in places, uneven but clear, cutting through the years like it had never left. Electricity always leaves a trail. You just have to follow it. Olivia exhaled slowly, her shoulders settling as if something inside her had finally aligned. She clicked. The system did not react dramatically. No sound, no alert, just a brief loading icon, then confirmation. Submitted. The word appeared in plain text, almost understated, as if it did not understand what it had just set in motion. Olivia leaned back in her chair, the tension in her body shifting, not disappearing, but changing shape. She was not bracing anymore. She was holding. Daniel watched the screen for a second, then looked at her. "That will reach the board before morning," he said. Olivia nodded once. Good. There was no relief in it, just clarity. She reached for the torn page again, folding it once, then again, smaller each time until it fit into the inside pocket of her notebook. Not discarded, not displayed, kept. Daniel noticed the movement but did not comment on it. Instead, he stepped back slightly, giving her space that felt intentional now, not distant. You understand what happens next, he said. Olivia closed the notebook, her hand resting on top of it, feeling the familiar texture beneath her palm. They will try to contain it, she said. Minimize it. Redirect it. She looked up at him, her expression steady. But it is already out of their hands. Daniel held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. Yes. The acknowledgement carried more weight than agreement. It was recognition. Olivia stood, pushing her chair back with a controlled movement, the legs gliding over the floor without the harsh scrape from earlier. She picked up her bag, slipping the notebook inside with care, not like an object, but like something that still mattered. I am not doing this for you, she said, not as a challenge, but as a boundary. Daniel's expression did not change, but something in his posture softened, just slightly. I know, he said. Olivia adjusted the strap on her shoulder, glancing once more at the screen, at the confirmation message that had already faded into the system's background. For the first time that night, the outcome was not hypothetical. It was in motion. She turned toward the door, then paused, her hand resting lightly against the glass. 5 years ago, she said, her voice quieter now, not directed at him so much as placed into the room itself. I sat in a room like that and said nothing. She did not look back. I am not doing that again. The words did not linger. They did not need to. She opened the door and stepped into the hallway, the softer lighting outside wrapping around her as the room behind her remained still. Daniel stayed where he was for a moment, his gaze moving from the door to the empty desk, to the faint impression left where the notebook had been. Then he exhaled slowly, the sound almost lost in the hum of the building, and followed, not to lead, not to stop her, but to see what came next. By the time the first wave of morning light reached the glass, the building no longer felt indifferent. It felt unsettled, not loud, not chaotic, just different in the way a room shifts after something irreversible has been said. Olivia stood near the window at the far end of the hallway, a paper cup of coffee cooling in her hand, untouched. Below, traffic had thickened into its usual rhythm, yellow cabs slipping between lanes, people moving with purpose like nothing had changed. Inside it had. She could feel it in the way conversations stopped half a beat too early when she passed, in the way her inbox had filled overnight, subject lines clipped, cautious, compliance review, immediate attention, executive follow-up. She had not opened any of them yet. Behind her, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Footsteps followed, measured, familiar. She did not turn right away. They moved faster than expected, Daniel said. His voice carried easily in the quiet, no longer filtered through distance or pretense. Olivia took a small sip of the coffee, winced slightly at the bitterness, then set the cup on the ledge beside her. That is what happens when something cannot be buried, she replied. She turned then, meeting his gaze without searching for anything in it. He was not dressed the same anymore. The uniform was gone, replaced with something cleaner, sharper, but the way he stood had not changed. Still deliberate, still observant. The difference was not in him. It was in how the room would see him now. The board convened at 6, he said. Access logs were verified. The credential has been suspended pending investigation. Olivia nodded once. No satisfaction, no surprise, just acknowledgement. And the report? She asked. It stands, he said. Unedited. That landed somewhere quieter, but deeper. Olivia reached into her bag and pulled out the notebook, resting it against the window frame. For a moment, she just held it there, her fingers tracing the worn edge like she had done 100 times before. Then she opened it, flipping to the page where the paper had been torn out. The imprint was still there, faint but visible, pressed into the fibers. She ran her hand over it once, then closed the notebook again. He would have liked that, she said, almost to herself. Daniel did not ask who. He did not need to. You did not just correct a mistake, he said. You changed the direction of it. Olivia let out a small breath, something softer than before. We will see, she said. Systems do not change overnight. No, he agreed. But people do. She glanced at him, just briefly, then looked back out at the city. Not all of them. No, he said again. But enough. The space between them settled into something quieter now, no longer defined by tension alone. Not easy, not resolved in a way that erased what had happened. Just understood. After a moment, Olivia reached into the notebook again and pulled out the folded piece of paper she had kept, the one with the ID written in her own hand. She unfolded it carefully, smoothing it flat against the glass. The ink had smudged slightly at the edges, but the numbers were still clear. She looked at it for a second, then tore it cleanly in half, and then again, smaller pieces this time, until it was no longer readable. Not erased, just no longer needed. She dropped the pieces into the empty coffee cup beside her. Daniel watched the movement, then looked back at her. "You are not holding on to it," he said. Olivia shook her head slightly. "I do not need to anymore." She closed the notebook and slipped it back into her bag, the motion familiar, but lighter somehow. For the first time, it did not feel like something she was carrying. It felt like something she had used. The elevator chimed again down the hall, voices rising and falling as the building fully woke up around them. Olivia picked up the coffee cup, now holding nothing but torn paper, and headed toward the trash bin. She paused for just a second before dropping it in, then continued walking. Daniel did not follow immediately this time. He stayed by the window, watching the reflection of the city shift across the glass, then turned slightly, his gaze moving in the direction she had gone. Not to stop her, not to lead, just to acknowledge that whatever came next would not look the same as what came before. If this story stayed with you, share what you felt and stay with us for more. Thank you.